Hello everyone and welcome on board the Sunrise Safari here. I don't think we're going to be seeing the sunrise because it's completely overcast and a little bit chilly this morning, about 17 degrees Celsius or 63 degrees Fahrenheit. But what a great start we've got off to with a large breeding herd of elephants. My name is Scott, if you haven't met me before, and I'm teamed up with Andrew on camera today. James is headed out with Brian on the other vehicle, and Nikki is directing the show with a little bit of help from Kirsty and Tara. So we came into this area this morning hoping to find the Nkahuma Pride. They were last seen hunting buffalo in this area late last night at the end of the Sunrise Safari, and now I've come back here hoping to find some tracks of them, or who knows, maybe even them on a buffalo kill. But before we could find any tracks, we bumped into this large herd of elephants. So let me just reposition quickly and get back in front of some of them. They're quite spread out at the moment, and there's some more about a quarter of a mile off to the left, but they're all slowly feeding in this general direction. And it's quite handy because it's actually taking us in the general direction that the Nkahuma Pride was last seen chasing the buffalo last night. It was too hard for anyone to follow them because the bush was very thick. So everybody just moved out the area, and now the search begins again. If you may be joining for your first time, a very warm welcome, and it's important that you realize two things about this safari. Firstly, it's live. It's happening this very second. Hard to believe, but true. And it's also interactive. So if you don't believe me that it's live, send through a question on either email, questions@WildEarthTV, or you could hashtag Safari Live on Twitter. Send us your name and where you're from, and that way we can chat to you and understand exactly how you guys are feeling. A big thanks for the updates from Joel and Arcadia, who were obviously monitoring the Djuma waterhole camera last night, and there was a lot of lion vocalizations heard, and who knows who it could have been, either the Nkahuma Pride or possibly even the Birmingham Coalition. I know Arcadia mentioned she doesn't want it to be the Birmingham Coalition because she doesn't want to see any more bloodshed, and I certainly hear you, Arcadia, but it is a reality over the coming months. There is going to be some carnage amongst the lions as the Birmingham Coalition come in and stamp their authority on this area. It's a little bit tricky because even though there's lots of elephants, can't see too many at the moment because the bush is so thick and they're all moving. But hopefully, in a minute or two, if we just take a bit patience, we should get some good views of them as they continue to work their way through this thick vegetation towards us. Okay, well, this is going to have to do for now. Andrew is not going to be very happy with me because this is not a cameraman's ideal scenario to be in. You can see a large grey blob or two in the thick bush, but like I said, they are slowly moving towards us, and if we allow them the opportunity to decide how close they would like to come to us, we could get lucky. Also, it's quite nice for you to see different angles like this, because you get an idea of how well even such a large animal can blend into these surroundings. And I've often been greatly surprised whilst on walking safaris, and even from the vehicle, at how close you can get to these giant beasts before actually seeing them. Now, that looks like a young bull, and you saw him kind of charge towards the other one playfully there. It would be bullying, because the one on the left is certainly bigger than the one on the right. But maybe he will switch his attention to us and give us a little bit of his adolescent attitude. James has decided to head out to the east of Djuma, just to let you know his plans. He said he has come across some tracks of buffalo which appear to be running, but hasn't found any lion tracks behind them. But he's moving into a different area to try and cover as much ground as possible. Just trying to look behind us to see where the rest of the herd is, and they're also slowly making their way towards us, but again there's this belt of very thick vegetation that's making it tricky for us. Well, very, very happy to hear that a lot of you are already enjoying this elephant sighting, and aren't we fortunate to get off to such a great start. And we've got a question all the way from Oregon. Good morning, Jennifer. Good to have you with us. Jennifer's interested to know, how have the current guides or presenters here for Wild Earth been lucky enough to get these jobs? And I guess it's slightly varying for the four of us, or five of us now, including Steph. But interestingly enough, Steph actually heard that I was back from East Africa this time last year when Wild Earth were looking for another presenter. And Steph and I knew one another as we worked for the same lodge here in South Africa. It's got two camps, one in the Sabi Sands and one in the Greater Kruger National Park. And Steph was, and still does, run a recruitment company finding guides and trackers for lodges throughout the country. So it was Steph who thankfully pointed me in the right direction. And I think Steph also got a hold of Brent, and Brent suggested James. Jamie, I'm not sure how she found out about it or how we found out about her. Good question though, Jennifer, and hopefully we'll be seeing lots more different guides and presenters coming through the Wild Earth crew, as it certainly will give you guys, the viewers, a more diverse safari experience. Well, thankfully the youngest little bull has now popped out into a clearing, but it may be short-lived. Let's see what its next move is. And there's a multitude of different birds calling this morning, which is making for a beautiful chorus. And it really has been interesting to note how the birds have become so much more vocal in the 2 weeks that I was on leave. The mornings and the evenings really do provide us with some wonderful bird song, and it will continue to get even more intense into the summer months. One call that we're all looking forward to hearing is that of the woodlands kingfisher, which we will hear all day and sometimes all night during the summer. And not only is it a wonderful call of the summer, but it's also one of the very pretty birds that migrate back from Central and North Africa back to this area for the summer months. Well, Andrew is doing a great job considering how thick it is in there, and it is quite nice to have these obscure angles from time to time, because it does give you an idea of how thick the vegetation is that these animals can move through and need to move through at this time of the year. There's not much food left now, so they're having to become quite resourceful in where they're finding it. And interestingly enough, I think 2 days ago on drive, we were watching elephants feeding on very dry branches, and they were surrounded by the bright green bushes of guarri trees. And guarri bushes have got very, very high tannin content. They are bitter and distasteful. And I mentioned that I'd never seen an elephant actually feeding on a guarri bush. But yesterday afternoon on tracking team, we saw an elephant doing exactly that. So another good example of how textbooks and how even past experience cannot always be perfectly reliable. That's a small jackalberry tree that it's now stripping the leaves off. Again, not hugely typical, and look at how wonderful his eye is. He's very close to us. And he just scratched his ear there. Anyway, it was the first time for both myself and Steph out on tracking team yesterday seeing an elephant eat on the highly bitter leaves of the guarri bush. It looks like this youngster may give us a little bit of a show here. You'll notice quite a few other elephants moving around now in this area. They're slowly approaching us. So our patience has eventually paid off. Well, we've been talking about change of seasons and how the summer is rapidly approaching us. And Kay has asked us, will we be changing the safari times? Because currently on the east coast of America, the broadcast starts at 12:30 and finishes at 3:30 in the morning. And yes, Kay, we certainly will be changing the going drive times. The mornings we will probably be going out half an hour earlier, and possibly the afternoons half an hour later. We're just trying to decide on the best time, and possibly we will change sometime next week. So that may suit some of you and it may not suit others, but apologies, we do need to just come out at the best possible times to try and show you the best possible action out here. Look at that rough and textured skin, full of crinkles and creases. And a few of them getting quite nice and close to us now. Elephants typically tend to feed quite slowly in the winter months because, I guess, for two reasons. They need to search more closely for tasty morsels, as well as the fact that they're probably just a little bit tired and ever so slightly undernourished, so they're on the go slow. Oh wow, look at that shot. Keep watching closely. Look, you can see right into its mouth. You'll also notice that there's hooked thorns on that little branch that it was chewing on. Oh, hello. This is a mother coming up to us. I think she's more interested in the plants that we are parked next to, and not necessarily us, so I don't think we have anything to worry about, even though she is very close. She's battling to get this thorny branch that she's just broken off into her mouth without it getting snagged on her lips, but it seems like she's worked it out now. Listen to her chewing. Well, great work from Andrew on camera there. It's always a bit difficult for the cameraman when they zoom in because they run the risk of the animal moving its head ever so slightly and then disappearing out of frame, but Andrew did wonderfully there. I'm sure you all enjoyed that close-up. I really do love the Safari Live experience because there are so many of you on board with us. We get a multitude of fascinating questions, and one of which has just come through from Patty. And Patty's in Seattle, and she's asked a question that I don't think I've ever heard before, and that is whether the African elephants will be able to communicate with Indian elephants. And I actually don't have a clue, Patty. Half of me is telling me that yes, they possibly could, but then the other half is saying no. So I don't have a clue, but if any of you do know the answer to that, please feel free to share it with us, and that way we can all learn and share interesting knowledge. And I think that really is an interesting question, Patty, so thanks for sending it through. And if nobody manages to find out the answer during this show, I will be sure to do some research on it afterwards. Isn't the trunk the most incredible adaptation? You mustn't forget that it's a nose. It's easy to forget that. So not only does it aid the elephant in swelling, but also hugely in feeding. If it wasn't for that incredibly flexible and maneuverable trunk, they wouldn't be able to acquire the large amounts of food they need to feed on every day with nearly as much ease as they currently do. And quite nice just to stop and listen for a while every few seconds, because you can hear almost every move these elephants are making. And I know Anna-Marie and Nikki in the final control are both loving listening to these elephants and hearing them chew on the branches. It also gives you a great idea of just how dry it is at this time of the year. Every step they take and every branch they chew on cracks and snaps, which is very easy to hear. And I guess as the vegetation gets drier, it becomes harder for the herbivores because they've got less food. But it's also important to remember that it also makes life a little bit harder for the carnivores. They've got less cover to hide behind when stalking their prey. And they also have this very noisy, dry leaf litter and grass that makes stalking silently up to their prey a little bit difficult. So I guess both predator and prey do find hardships in the drier months. Well, I haven't heard anything on the radio about lion tracks, so I'm quite fascinated that nobody has found any tracks. But what that could mean is that they may have been successful in their buffalo hunts, and they could be not very far away from where we are here, snacking on a buffalo. Failing that, it's important to remember that it is a large area that these animals get to roam, and so do we. And maybe somebody just hasn't traveled down the right road yet to find their tracks. And one thing that none of us know regarding the Nkahuma Pride is whether the two members, Junior and one lioness, did actually successfully manage to relocate the other 5 members of the Pride. So that is something that we would love to find out. And I know Lily B was asking after that specific point. But Lily, we're going to have to go and search for these lions to determine that. Nobody actually saw the Lions reunite, and shortly after the end of the evening broadcast, when you were with Brent and the Lions, everybody moved out of the area because they moved into such a thick area that you could not follow them. So nobody knows just yet, but hopefully it won't take long for us to work out where they've gone. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you would like to jump onto James's vehicle to get an update on how his morning is going, and I'm sure have 1 or 2 laughs in between. He's a very funny character if you haven't met him before, so enjoy, and we'll see you all a little bit later.
Good morning everybody, and welcome to Wendy. Wendy being the slightly irascible Land Rover 90 that I am currently sitting upon. We're sitting here beneath a Balanites tree with some nyala. Now, before I tell you about them, I shall tell you a little bit about what you're doing. Well, I suppose you've been with Scott for a while, so you know you're on a live morning safari, and that we want to hear from you as much as possible. Hashtag Safari Live if you're tweeting away in the modern fashion, or questions at WildEarthTV if you're on email. Like I say, the SA Postal Service has been on strike for roughly 9 months, and so sending us a postcard is a business activity. On camera this morning we have Brian, who is dressed in a variety of different ruffs and buffs and warm things, and some rather fetching slip-slops. It's quite impressive, really. Anyway, we're sitting under this tree watching some nyala eating the last seeds, excuse me 1 second, of a torchwood tree. So the radio started to explode in my ear there. And what they're eating are the seeds of this torchwood tree, and the seeds are filled with a very nutritious oil that is flammable. That's not why they're eating it, but it's also very good for them at this time of the year because there's not much else to eat. Now, all the way around here, and I'm sure you were looking with Scott at how those elephants were blending so beautifully into the grey background. That background is grey because there are no leaves on it. Now, these nyala are almost exclusively browsers, which means they don't eat grass, and so they eat seeds and leaves and pods if they can find them. And at this time of the year, things are pretty lean, and so they are now eating the seeds of this torchwood tree. And I suspect that they can't eat that many of them, you know. Torchwood tree oil is also used to sort of kill fish, so it's not, I suspect there are elements of it that are a bit toxic, and so they're probably only eating it now because they're slightly desperate for food. Anyway, it's a very beautiful and peaceful little scene out here. So I'll just give you an idea of what we're listening to and what we can hear and smell. Very quiet this morning. Just the wind basically rustling through the dry twigs and just shifting the grass a bit, and every so often I can hear a white-browed scrub robin calling way in the distance. I believe there were some birds around the elephants, but on a cloudy morning like this, which has a slightly eerie feel to it, there is definitely less bird song than there would be otherwise. There you can hear the wind moving. But I felt a tremendous peace as I drove out this morning. Sometimes you feel an air of expectation and excitement, and today I just felt a sort of contented peace. Hey, Brian?
Very much so.
Yeah. That's exactly what these nyala are reaffirming as they graze peacefully beneath this tree. Well, some of them. There, just in the distance I can hear a southern boo-boo, and they call in duet, lovely duet. Right, so I think we'll probably drive on from here. We came into the eastern side of the reserve today in order to see if we could find some tracks of perhaps the Birmingham boys coming across onto Djuma, and there are no tracks coming across here. And interestingly, the Matimba males, who I'm sure you're all wondering about, now perhaps you're a new viewer, and if you are, you're most welcome, and we love to have you along. The Matimbas were until very recently the dominant coalition of lions in this area, 2 magnificent males, and they were found today just to the south of us on Cheetah Plains. And that's quite interesting because their territory has basically been usurped by 5 young bucks known as the Birmingham Boys, and I don't know where they are at the moment, but the Matimbas seem to be coming back for a little incursion. Whether that will result in their being able to stay around for a while, I don't know. I don't think so. I think that they've pretty much lost their territory, but that's basically what's happening with the lions. So we came into this area to see if we could find some tracks. We haven't managed to find any yet, but we'll see. And we're also hoping to find some, perhaps some tracks of Karula, a queen of Djuma, a young, old female leopard, or middle-aged female leopard. She was around here yesterday. And just while we're doing that, the lions are obviously in a great state of flux, and so it's difficult to understand sometimes what's going on, and the textbooks don't always cover the sort of strange behaviors that regular observers of lion behavior get. And Leslie in California, very nice question about why the Matimbas, at least why the Birmingham Boys, would have killed a lioness. Now, in case you haven't been watching, a little while back, the new coalition of Birmingham males killed a lioness from the Nkuhuma Pride at a kill site. Now, there are various reasons for this. Some male lions that come into an area to take it over do sometimes kill lionesses. We don't really know why. We think what this was a sort of fight over food. The Nkuhuma Pride was on a buffalo kill, and the 5 male lions came in, tried to take the food away, and sometimes the lionesses will have a bit of a fight at some young males, and sometimes they'll just back off, and obviously one of them decided to have a go at one of these guys, and she came off, unfortunately, very second best. And while a female lion is a very large creature compared with most creatures that you know of, roughly 150 to 180 kilograms, a big male is well over 200 sometimes, and so it really isn't a competition at all in terms of a fight. So I think that's why. It's fairly abhorrent behavior. It's not unusual though, a coalition takes over. And remember, when these coalitions take over an area, they're full of testosterone, and testosterone does make males of all species slightly more aggressive than they would be otherwise. And so they're full of testosterone. They've been looking for the males of the area to try and take over, so the best way to describe it is to say that their blood is up. And as a human being, you want to know what that means. If you've ever been in a physical fight of any kind, or you've perhaps played a sports game, a very competitive sports game, and it takes you a while after that game to sort of calm down, and that your blood is up at the end of it. And that's exactly, I think, what happens with these male lions. They rush around here trying to take over territory, and their testosterone's coursing, and their blood is up, and they're looking, and they're aggressive and looking to try and take over territory. And then if they come across something that challenges them, they're going to come off second best. So I think basically that's what happened, Leslie. Right, on that slightly aggressive note, on this peaceful morning, we are going to reverse out of here. It's probably going to make a horrible noise because we're parked on a couple of strychnos trees. And in fact, before we do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the strychnos tree. This strychnos tree here, let me try and break off a piece. This is called Strychnos madagascarensis, or the black monkey orange. Now, Strychnos madagascarensis is called strychnos because of the presence of strychnine. I thought only in the seeds, until recently Eugenius, who is our technical genius, who basically makes sure that you can receive a high definition signal all the way from the middle of the African wild here. He was busy helping Jamie get out of a hole, and he cut himself on one of these branches, and the next day his arm was basically rotting off the front of his body, which was very unpleasant for him. And he went off to the doctor, and that's what I think it was probably an allergic reaction as well, but he got some strychnine of some kind into his arm, and it created a rather nasty wound. Anyway, we sewed his arm back on, and he's okay for now. We didn't really sew his arm back on, he's just got a little bandage on now, but he's fine. So, very toxic this tree can be. but especially the seeds. You don't want to eat the seeds of the tree. Okay, on that note, we're going to press on, see if we can find Karula's tracks, perhaps some lion tracks, perhaps something else. Who knows? Right. In fact, I'm just going to go and get a little piece of, I'll try and find you one of these seeds that the torchwood that Banyal have been eating. And Jennifer, while we drive, I said I was going to tell you what I was smelling, and I'm sorry I did not do that. It was most remiss of me. Brian? There's not a huge amount of smell with the wind blowing, and so it's sort of a fresh dry grass with a hint of moisture in the air from the front. Yes, hint of dew. But it's always lovely out here. Thank you, Jennifer, for reminding me that. I'm just going to jump out of the car and see if I can find you a torchwood seed. Hope that you can also see all the elephant dung around here, of course, and that's because the elephants love the torchwood seeds. Here we go. That is a torchwood seed. That's what the animals are eating. I don't think I'm going to have a taste of it myself. They're supposed to be flammable, but every time I've tried to burn them, I've made a total fool of myself by just burning my fingers. So I think we're just going to let that one be. It's called a torchwood because the oil inside, if you gather enough of it, is supposed to be flammable. So that is the torchwood Balanites mogami. Apparently the favourite of Nicky Austin in the Final Control. As we drive out of here, I gave you a little bit of a description of Brian's wardrobe, and I described his shoes as flip-flops. And MJ wants to know if that's the same as slip-slops. Yes indeed it is. Sorry about that, Brian. I think I've chosen a rather poor route out of here. I was trying to extricate us from here without too much noise, but I'm not sure that that's going to happen. A remarkable act of strength and acrobatics. You know, Brian actually was part of a circus at one stage. On the trapeze you were, Brian? On the high trapeze. Brian's about 6'4". That must have been an extremely high trapeze. The things we do for money. Right, back out onto Mamba Road, where I have mercifully not seen the Mamba yet. And this was the site of my first Karula meeting about, I don't know, 8 weeks ago, I guess. And I haven't seen her since. Twin Dams is just down there. It's now a twin dust bowl, and that's where Brent had Karula yesterday before she, in typical Karula fashion, spirited away and didn't leave a track. By the afternoon she was gone. Signal's not good, sorry about that, and I'll see you just now. He's tracking the lions.
Welcome back, everyone, and James was just going through a little bit of a tricky signal area there, so apologies if the picture is a bit shaky, but welcome back on board with Andrew and myself. We did find some tracks of at least a few members of the Nkuhuma Pride. I'm not entirely sure whether it was of all of them, 5 of them, or just 2 of them. They were split up into 2 different groups yesterday, for those of you who don't know. And they were heading west towards our boundary with Arethusa. So on our left is Djuma, on our right is Arethusa. And I'm just going to check carefully down this boundary road. If we don't have any tracks coming out, well then we'll reassess and make another plan. I know Steph is also out on foot doing some tests with the backpack for the walking safaris, and he has found tracks of the 2 individuals that were alone yesterday, but there's nothing to say that they have not yet rejoined with the Pride. Okay, well, here we have some evidence. And I can see where the lion was actually lying down here on our right. It's not easy to see, but those marks are probably from where her tail was sweeping the road when she was lying down. And then up ahead you can see some tracks. Not easily from this angle, but that is a lion track heading straight into Arethusa. So good prospects. Now as we continue driving along, I just want to see how many tracks I can find, and that way we'll be able to establish whether they have possibly relocated or how many members of the Pride we are actually following. So that was one there. I think I saw another one further up. Tricky. I don't think this is the whole Pride. I think possibly this is the 2 individuals that could not meet up, that didn't manage to successfully reunite with the rest of the Pride last night. So, what I can also tell you is it looks like there were some human footprints around those tracks, analyzing how fresh they might be. So I think some of the Arethusa guys are already on the trail. Good news is that there is a road very close by that will loop us around in the right direction to continue following up on these tracks. It appears that 2 of the Nkuhumas crossed back west into Arethusa, just south of Galanati's junction on Triple N. It's really important for us to keep everyone updated on the radio networks as to what's going on. And that way, by sharing information, we can all collectively work together in trying to track down these animals. I've just switched over to another radio station that's used whilst on Arethusa, and a different one's used while we're on Djuma. The reason why there are different radio channels is to simply create less congestion and radio chatter. It can be quite off-putting having a lot of radio chatter when you're trying to guide your guests. And that's why there are different channels for different areas of operation. Good morning guys, Scott here. Has anybody managed to locate on Ngala across west over Triple N by Galanati's road? Okay, well now we are on Arethusa. and hopefully we will be able to get some updates from the guys. When I got onto the radio now, I didn't hear any responses, so not sure what the problem could be there, but no need to panic. I'm sure if there is anything interesting going on here, we will find out sooner enough. And when following tracks of animals, it's important to not worry about necessarily seeing each individual footprint, but it's a bit of a trial and error game, a lot of leapfrogging and looping ahead, because if you're to stay looking for each individual footprint as the animals move, you'd probably never catch up to them. Nikki, please could you change base stations, because I cannot hear anything you are saying. And as we move deep into Arethusa, sometimes the radio that I communicate with final control with doesn't work too well, so just ask Nikki to try and change onto a different radio channel, as I cannot hear anything she's saying to me. Wow, here's an interesting site. I haven't been here since I went on leave. And this is Red Dam. But currently, as you can see, there's no water. And it's just a dried out mud wallow. And it is harsh times now for the animals. When I left 3 weeks ago, this was a little puddle where animals could drink, and because there are less places for them to drink now, it kind of helps us in a way, because it concentrates animals in the areas where there is remaining water. So that's kind of helping us. Not really great for the animals, but there is a lot of water around here, so they don't have to travel too far. And we just got a question through from Daniel. Morning, Daniel. And Daniel's all the way in California. He's asking, why don't we see lions on every drive? It's a good question. There's a few different answers for it. Basically, the area that we're allowed to traverse is not very big, and therefore there are simply not always lions on our property where we're allowed to go. So that's the main contributing factor. Another very important factor is that even when they are on our property, Daniel, they can be difficult to find. Just like this morning, there's been no sign of any lion yet, even though they are in the area. So we're fairly convinced some of them could still be on Djuma. I'm convinced at least 2 of them have possibly come across here onto Arethusa. And it's just difficult to search all the areas, Daniel. The blocks which are encompassed by roads are sometimes very big, and therefore it makes finding the animals when they are in the middle of these blocks, especially if they're thick blocks, difficult to find. But we do very well here compared to a lot of other wilderness viewing areas, and we typically are spoiled with great game viewing. And another thing, I guess that's important to mention, that it's not only about the lions, Daniel. As great as it is watching them, most of the time they're fast asleep. So I would personally prefer to watch a weaver bird build its nest than watch a lion sleeping, or watch just about anything on the move than watch lions sleeping. But on the flip side, you do need to invest time with the predators when they are sleeping, because we never know when they're going to get up. And it's when they get up and active, or potentially some prey stumbles upon the lion when they're sleeping, that action can unfold. On top of that, Daniel, there's been a lot of shifts and dynamics between the lions in this area. There's currently a huge dispute going on between 2 males, the Matimba males, who are old members of an even larger coalition that splits up, but they've become very dominant in this area and are now in the process of being overthrown by 5 young males. And this shift in dominance and power has already caused quite dramatic changes in the Nkuhuma pride's behavior, and they've even lost one of their lioness from their pride to one of these 5 new males that are coming through. I know James touched on that a little bit earlier, and it doesn't make sense that a male lion would kill a lioness that you could in the future mate with. But I think James's summary of that is that they're in such a heightened rage and in such a hype as they're coming through with all their testosterone and adrenaline as they're trying to acquire this new territory, that sometimes lioness will get caught in the crossfire. Also on top of that, a lioness, or many lioness within the pride of the Nkuhumas or any pride, will naturally want to defend and protect members of their pride, in this case Junior, a young male. So the Birmingham coalition would have maybe had their sights set on Junior, the young male, and the other lioness within the pride may have tried to stand up for him and then got caught in the crossfire. Okay, so still no further sign of any more tracks, but we've done a very big loop ahead of their general movements of direction, which is another reason that makes it difficult to find lions in this specific area that we're working now. The blocks are very big. If there were a lot more roads through this area, it would be easy to crisscross and find their tracks and then eventually find them. But there simply aren't many roads in this area. Morning guys, got you any updates on the safari? So I still haven't heard anything from the guys, although now it sounds like somebody might be trying to. Morning, go ahead. No luck with that, but we'll keep prospering forth and maybe we'll get close enough to one of the vehicles to be able to actually hear them, but I can't hear a word anyone's saying at the moment. We continue searching for these lion or anything in that fact along the way. We can update Mars in Arizona on another animal that we have been looking for, several of them actually, and Mars is interested to know, do we know where the new hyena den site is? And sadly, Mars, we don't. We've got a few speculations as to the area that they could be in, but we have spent time on foot there. I spent an hour walking around an area where I thought we could get lucky and didn't come up with anything. I just saw some tracks in the road, but the hyena tracks it looks like. So sadly, Mars, no, we're still in the process of working out where they've moved to. And we are also missing them. They're great quality, that hyena den, and it'll be interesting to see how much bigger that tiny little black cubber's got. But for now, we don't have any good news about that. It is important to say that Mars also did mention how much they loved yesterday's drive. I guess both morning and afternoon were both action-packed and full of big cats. And naturally on safari it will ebb and flow. Some drives and sometimes you'll have lots of big cats and others they'll be gone. Or at least not gone but evading our presence in these big thick blocks that surround the roads. It's going to be a topic of discussion for the coming weeks and months, and that is of the Birmingham Coalition trying to take over the territory of the Matimba males. And Susanna's interested to know how far will lions travel in order to acquire a new territory, and I guess then how big will that territory actually be? In terms of how far a coalition may need to travel from when they are kicked out of their pride until when they actually become big enough and bold enough to try and dominate an area, it will vary entirely on the individual scenario of that specific coalition, how big they are, how many dominant coalitions are around them. But they could move large distances, 50 to 100 kilometers away from their natal area, but in other cases they may not move too far. In the case of the Birmingham Coalition, they come from probably about 10 or 15 kilometers away, but have stretched up to 30 or 40 kilometers away whilst waiting to become big enough and bold enough to come back into this area and acquire dominance. They moved much further north into the Manyaleti Reserve, which is to the north of us, and they moved there kind of in February or March after we saw them a lot during November, December, January. They moved considerably further north, further away from their natal range, where they spent about 4 or 5 months, and it's only been in the last month or so that they've been coming back into this area. And that could be because there's a very big dominant coalition further north that they've sized up and they rather would not try and overthrow. And that's why they've come back south to where they know there's two males that are beginning to get a little bit old. So there'll be huge variances in each pride takeover and within each coalition's life, and the areas that they move in will always be greatly different. Come on, lions. They have to be somewhere. But at the moment we're just getting no clues. I'm not seeing too much else along the way to stop for. Trust me, we're not avoiding anything, frantically searching for these lions. But there just doesn't seem to be too much else going on for now. But that could change in an instant. We could come around the corner and have the whole Inkauma pride chasing down a buffalo for all we know. Wouldn't that be a great change of scenery? All who knows, maybe a leopard, wild dog. We did get an interesting report mentioning that the wild dog pack that has been denning to the north of us in the Manyaleti have actually started running with their pups. So from about 2 to 3 months of age, wild dog pups will be moved, will no longer rely on a den site, and will start running free with the pack. So the pack do not always go back to a den every night. It's only when they have pups. And once they start running with the pups at around 2 to 3 months of age, they will then move huge distances and sleep wherever they require to. They don't have to go back to a den. And the last message we got from somebody in the Manuleti is that they were seen heading south. So hopefully they keep coming south through the Buffelshoek property, and then we'll get to see the new additions to one of the wild dog packs. We were unfortunately right in the middle of no man's land, and therefore didn't get many opportunities to view the wild dogs while they were denning, but now that they've stopped denning, we can expect to see an increase in sightings of them. One more try on the Arethusa radio. Can anybody copy me? Checking the antennas were all upright and secure, which they are. Sometimes they get bent backwards, which will, frequency isn't as good, but not sure what could be the problem today. Torn as to what to do now, because I can't communicate with any of the Arethusa guides, and that coupled with the fact that I'm convinced it's only 2 of the Nkuhumas that crossed here, it might be worth heading back to Djuma where we could try and find the entire pride, or the remainder of the pride, the other 5 members of the pride. But keep driving down this road and see if we don't get any more might get a few more clues along this road. Who knows, possibly some tracks of another animal that might be worth tracking down. As you can see, it's still completely overcast, and quite a moody and dramatic morning here in the Sabi Sands. These clouds will in all likelihood not provide us with any moisture, and it would be a very pleasant surprise if they did. It's still a few months until the rainy season kicks in. What this overcast weather does make though for us is tricky tracking conditions. Very difficult to see tracks in flat light. Ideally you have morning sunlight beaming in from the east, or afternoon sunlight from the west at a low angle, which casts shadows on the tracks and makes them easier to see. I'm told that James has also not had much luck this morning, but we're going to send you across to him anyway for a change of scenery, and that way maybe I'll be able to focus on trying to get a hold of these Arethusa guides and find out what's going on over here. We will see you all a little bit later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Wendy. We have found tracks of Karula. That is the good news. The bad news, of course, is that she can fly, and so the tracks have been lost. They did come into this block to the left of me, and she was heading towards where I am now, but I haven't found any further tracks. Although there are 2 honey badgers. Look at that. Look, Brian, can you see them? Oh man, I don't know if we're going to be able to get in there. Shall we try? There's 2 honey badgers there. There they are on the termite mound. They're still running around there. don't go away, honey badgers. We can't really get close to them. We're on this termite mound. I'm just going to stop here for 1 minute. And we're running around this termite mound here. 2 of them. They seem to have disappeared. Oh, what a sadness. Anyway, you've got a brief glimpse of them. We'll do a little loop around there and see if we can't get a better look. So Karula was heading towards this area, but you know, we could probably spend 2 or 3 hours just on foot in the drainage line trying to find her tracks, and so we probably won't do that. She hasn't seemed to have come out onto this road. And I think the tracks are probably from early last night, so she could really be anywhere. So we're going to drive out to the east, back onto the sort of eastern cut line, and then back down along the southern boundary and see what we can find out. I know that Steph, who is on foot testing the walking kit, has managed to find a couple of lion tracks, so that's good. And while honey badgers are largely nocturnal animals, it's not entirely unheard of for them to be active around this time of the day, especially when it's a cool day like this. I wonder if they don't have a little home in this termite mound right here. All I saw was a flash of white from that white mantle that they have on their backs. And unusual to see 2 of them together, unless it's a mother and a youngster, or perhaps a courting couple. What's that there, Brian? Nearly took off Brian's left foot. Would have made him very unpleasant. Wow, that was amazing. So, just for those of you who perhaps don't know, a honey badger is a mammal known as a mustelid. It comes from a family called the Mustelidae, and they're named, I think, for the smelly anal gland that they have, which they will use liberally, a bit like a skunk, I suppose, if threatened. And they are known as one of the most voracious or sort of toughest predators out here. And they'll eat any kind of meat that they can find, and they've been seen warding with lions. They're known to be particularly vicious, a bit like I suppose a wolverine from the northern hemisphere. That's a similar kind of character that they have. Very tough and not to be trifled with lightly. If I stand about that high off the ground, quite long, very shaggy skin, and they're known as honey badger because what they do is they will follow a bird called a honey guide. They have a sort of symbiotic relationship where they'll follow the honey guide to a hive and break open the hive, and while they're eating the honey and the wax, the honey guide will eat the bee larvae, and because the honey guide is obviously not strong enough to open up a hive on its own, it leaves the badger there, and the badger will use its huge long claws to rip open the hive, and so they share a meal together. It's wonderful. The only other time I've seen them here was with Andrew. He spotted a mother and a little pup, and they were much more confiding than those two, which seemed to just disappear. I suspect they were courting. They looked like two adults to me. Here's Karula's tracks right here. Karula's come out onto this road, right onto the eastern boundary, and I suspect she's disappeared into Torchwood. I'm afraid the tracks in this light are going to be very difficult to see, hey Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's there. She's just going across the road in front of us. And then there she is. And off into Torchwood. I'm afraid. Oh well, at least we know where she's gone. Not that that helps us a great deal. Yeah. Right, I'm just going to turn around quickly and we're going to head down to the southern boundary. She could of course be sitting in a tree here, some kind of hapless breakfast. So the reason, this is a very good question, that I know this is, well, I'm guessing it's Karula. It's most likely to be Karula. Mainly, well, we know it's a female leopard from the tracks. They're small and obviously female. And then, how do I know that it's not Shadow, for example? Well, it's well out of Shadow's territory, well within the area that Karula's been spending time. And look, it's not impossible that Shadow would come out here while she was mating with Tingana, but again, Tingana would be way out of his territory, and his tracks would also be around here. So I think it's most likely that this is Karula's tracks, and I mean, she has been around here, a little bit south of here, and up to sort of Twin Dams area. That's been her sort of territory for the last little while. Interesting question from Zoomy Jody. Would like to know what noises a honey badger makes. I don't know, you know. Brian, have you ever heard them making a noise? I think they're pretty silent, you know. I don't think they make a huge racket by default. They will growl. I've heard them growl like a sort of angry dog, but I don't think they make too much other noise, actually. That's quite an interesting question. I'm pretty sure it's just a growl. They probably make a throaty growl. Some baboon tracks on the road. And I don't know why, but we don't get a lot of baboons around here. Every other reserve I've ever worked, we've seen lots and lots of baboons. Honey badgers, while we're on the subject of honey badgers and what they eat, they will eat honey, of course, and they'll eat bee larvae, and they'll eat any kind, they'll even scavenge. And in some areas, they eat snakes. And Tina, you ask, have I ever seen them eat a cobra? No, I haven't. But there is that wonderful footage of the honey badger, I think it's in the Kalahari, fighting with a snouted cobra. I think it's a snouted cobra. And the cobra actually bites the badger. And the badger kind of collapses, and you think it's going to die, and then about 3 hours later it stands up and wanders off. It's absolutely fine. They process the venom very quickly. So I haven't seen them eat a cobra, but absolutely they will eat snakes very readily if they can get hold of them. Baboons go off there towards Cheetah Plains, which is where the Matimba male lions are. I had an amazing experience with some baboons recently. I was, as some of you will know, I was filming a cycle tour through some reserves up in the very northern reaches of South Africa and in southern Botswana and southern Zimbabwe. And at one spot there's an interesting relationship that's developed between the farmers and the elephants of the area. So elephants will eat, especially at this time of the year, will raid crops, especially if it's a citrus farm or something like that. They'll go in there and they'll raid crops, and there's nothing you can do to keep them out. Even an electric fence, an elephant will very quickly learn to break by, they won't run through it, they'll take sticks and break it down. They're incredibly intelligent. And what the farmers have done is basically made a pact with the elephants that they will get a certain supply of oranges per week or month or whatever it is, and what it does is it keeps the elephants away from the farms, and apparently this has been going on for decades. And, the one place we were, I was sitting on a rock, a magnificent area where these huge kind of granite boulders rise out of the plains, and I was climbed up onto one to film across towards the camp where the cyclists were, and in between me and the camp there was a sort of feeding area, and two tractors, low-bed tractor with the low-bed tipper trailers came on full of oranges, and there were one or two elephants around, but as soon as those tractors started coming towards the area, you could hear the baboons start to shout. From miles all the way around, from about 3 kilometers, you could hear them yelling. They recognized the sound of the diesel tractors and started gapping it. You could see them herring across the rocks from all directions, coming towards the oranges, and then they would sit and fight with each other over the oranges, and it was a hilarious thing to see, and also fascinating to see how clever they are, that they've learned that the sound of that diesel engine moving means oranges. And a whole lot of troops converged on each other, so there was quite a lot of violence in the area, but eventually it all calmed down when the elephants kind of instilled some discipline in the feeding procedures, and then everybody ate quietly and went their separate ways. Right, so we've come back, we've done basically a big full circle here, checked for Karula, and she's gone east, so we're now going to head back basically towards to where Sindile was yesterday and see if we can't find him. I know that Steph and Scott are on the lion tracks in Kohumas. And Siberia Zumi, thank you for your comment. You say that there are more baboons around in the summer months. Well, that's great. I really enjoy watching them because they're always doing something, normally ridiculous. I don't think it's easy being a baboon, especially a male baboon in the troop where the hierarchy is so defined. And the big males are not known to be particularly sympathetic to the ones. Keep an eye out for tracks on the road, of course, because this is where Shadow and Tingana went. This is exactly where they've crossed over here. In case you're wondering what that sort of cricket-like sound is, it isn't in fact a swarm of crickets or a small herd of squirrels living in the engine. It is Wendy's alternator, and I am definitely not mechanically equipped enough to fix it, but there is a mechanic coming through tomorrow, hopefully, and he will sort it out. Quite temperamental, our old Land Rovers. So as I was saying, Tingana and Shadow, and if you don't know who they are, they're a territorial male leopard and male and female leopard from the area, and they were mating yesterday, and they headed off in here to consummate their love, shall we say. They'll probably be mating for another 2 days, day or two. Hang on, there's some lion tracks there. So Scott and Steph are following up on two tracks of two lions. Here we go. You see that? This is one male lion. On the road, he's coming down the road and turning up here. You can see exactly where he goes. I see that there have been some people looking around here, but I suspect that they're probably from the south of us. There he goes straight through there. See that, right? Let's see if we can get you a picture of it. There we go. That's the male lion track there. Not a very good example of one. That's quite interesting. Maybe we'll just go up here and then take Chelapan Road. So, I am sort of heading towards where we saw Sindile yesterday, but we did spend about 3 hours with him, so it would be quite nice to see some lions. Possibly doing something, so he's headed in there. I'm just going to drive around here, on the other side of the block. Right, and while we're just trying to figure out what's going on with these lions, Scott has got a very large avian predator with him, and we'll go across to him and see what they're doing there.
Welcome back, everyone. And we didn't find the predator we were looking for, but we have found a very, very special bird of prey. And it's called a martial eagle. It's by far the biggest bird of prey that we get in this area, and it's got a 2.5 meter wingspan. Hard to believe, but they are massive. Not the best view. It's all huddled up, it's quite cold still, and like most birds of prey, they wait until things heat up before they start flying. That way they can conserve energy. They don't need to flap their wings. Look at him focusing his head in all different directions, possibly looking for some prey. Even though it is cold, he could bomb down onto them. There's a tree squirrel that you may be able to hear alarm calling. I'll just keep quiet for a few seconds. And because I'm guessing this martial eagle may have been here for a while, the squirrel's alarm calls are not as intense as they would be when this eagle first arrived, and you could say the squirrel's almost getting tired of continually chattering out that alarm. Well, it'll be interesting to see if any other animals come along to try and mob this bird of prey. Fork-tailed drongos are often the boldest of the smaller birds that can fly in and try and peck these birds on the head and get them out of the area. Look at that bright yellow eye. They've also got those beautiful little brown spots on their white undercarriage. And they are capable of catching huge prey, up to the size of baby impala. Duiker, steenbok, monkeys will all fall prey to these birds, as well as francolins and guinea fowl. But for now, I think most of the prey animals are safe, and it looks really too comfortable and cold to be doing any hunting just yet. I Sadly can't see the squirrel, otherwise I'll try and point it out to you. Some of you may remember a wonderful sighting of a martial eagle, who knows, possibly the same one, feeding on the remains of a kill, and that was with Jamie a couple of weeks ago. Oh, David and Goliath. The Cape turtle dove on the left, who's obviously maybe trying to impress some ladies, but that Cape turtle dove will probably know that this bird of prey usually attacks larger prey species. And it's obviously, oh, well maybe it's just realized now where it's sitting, and it ducked off hurriedly. You can also hear the call of the go away bird, quack, in the distance. And the squirrel is still going at it. Interestingly enough, yesterday when we were looking for the two members of the Nkuhuma Pride, we heard a squirrel alarm calling, and much like this, you could hear the squirrel was kind of tired and therefore had been alarming for quite some time. And Steph and Andrew went off on foot and found a martial eagle that they were shouting at. It's difficult to distinguish between what a squirrel is alarming at, but generally they can lead you to interesting sightings. I remember it wasn't too long ago driving through the Mawati riverbed where a squirrel led us to a genet in a tree, and Jeandre was on camera. He managed to get a glimpse of it darting off through the bushes. This is a big marilla tree that the eagle is perched in. It's going to be fascinating to watch the change as the leaves start to bloom, and after the leaves will come the marula fruits, which are really tasty, high in vitamin C. The elephants love them. But this tree is certainly going to transform into a very, very different scene in the coming months. Sadly, no further luck with the Nkuhuma Pride, either of the two portions thereof. But we still do have time on our side. We're only halfway through the show, so maybe something will change a little bit later. Well, even though we may not be on lion tracks here, I'm told James has found some male lion tracks that are heading towards Twin Dam. So, oh wow, look at his head. I really love the way they bobble their head from side to side in order to focus. I wonder what it had seen off in the distance there. Because it is all huddled up and not sitting as it normally would, it's not the most pretty display that you would usually see a martial eagle in. Usually they will be standing more upright. They're a very bold bird of prey. Here it is here. Depending on which way the wind's blowing, the little crest you can see here can be ruffled upwards, but it's not always going to be clearly visible. But what you can see is a lot of those brown specks that you would have been able to see earlier, and those massive talons that are capable of latching onto, like I said, baby impala. They also feed on monitor lizards quite often, large monitor lizards, which is quite tough prey. They are hardy animals and very, very strong. And I've actually seen footage of a martial eagle riding a very large monitor lizard. It had latched onto its back, and the monitor lizard was continuing to try and walk off. Eventually, the martial eagle won, but it literally got carried by this monitor lizard. So they can be quite interesting in terms of the larger prey that they hunt. Sadly, I've never actually seen one catch anything. It's one thing that I really wish we could somehow manage to do, is see the birds of prey hunting more often, but understandably, because they fly so quickly and move so far, it's very difficult to be at the right time to see them actually strike. So, something to look forward to in the future, but it is a very, very difficult thing to capture on film or even see. I wonder if we should maybe go and look at the squirrel. It could be quite amusing. Let's go and see what the squirrel has to say.